After my father's death, I didn't tell my stepmother that he had left me $20 million in his will. What happened next showed me just how far greed can twist someone you once called family. A few days after the funeral, Linda insisted we have lunch together at the house. She said it was important to discuss the future, though I knew what that really meant. The table was set neatly, just like she liked it, but the air between us was tense. I sat down quietly, still carrying the weight of losing my father, while she wasted no time starting her performance. "You need to understand something, Claire," she said, her fork clinking against her plate. "This house, this life, your father built it with me. It doesn't belong to you." I looked down at my food, pushing it around without eating. I could feel her eyes on me, sharp and demanding. "You're an adult," she snapped, her voice rising. "You don't need anything from this family. I'm the one who kept your father happy all these years. I'm the one who deserves what he left behind." Her words hit like stones, but I stayed quiet. She mistook my silence for weakness and leaned forward, her tone turning bitter. "Don't think for a second you'll get some handout. Whatever's left, it's mine. You should be grateful if I let you stay here a few weeks long. Honestly, you're nothing but a burden now." Her voice cracked through the room, sharp and ugly. The clatter of silverware stopped. Even the air seemed to freeze. I gripped the edge of my chair, anger rising in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I simply stared at her, letting her dig her own hole deeper. Inside, though, I burned. I wanted to laugh at the confidence in her voice, the way she thought she held all the cards. She had no idea that every word out of her mouth only proved my father right to cut her off. She thought she was putting me in my place, but the truth sat quietly in the back of my mind. Everything she was claiming, everything she shouted about, already belonged to me. I lifted my glass, took a slow sip of water, and set it down carefully, never breaking eye contact. "Are you finished?" I asked softly, her face twisted with anger. "Don't you dare talk back to me. You have nothing, Claire. Nothing. And soon, you'll see that for yourself." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just let her words hang in the air, knowing the day was coming when she would discover exactly how wrong she was. The morning I went to my father's lawyer's office, my stomach was tied in knots. The building was quiet, the kind of place where even footsteps sounded too loud. I sat across from the lawyer, a gray-haired man who had known my father for years. He spoke gently, but his words carried the weight of everything my father had prepared before he died. He opened the folder and began reading the will. With each line, my chest grew tighter. My father had left me everything. The money, the estate, the business assets. Every single part of what he had worked for was written under my name. $20 million. I had known he wanted me to be secure, but hearing it aloud made my hands tremble. And then came the part that stopped me cold. Linda wasn't mentioned anywhere. Not a house, not a single account, not even a token gift. The lawyer paused, giving me a look that said he had expected my reaction. He explained that my father had made the decision carefully, not out of spite but out of clarity. He had seen Linda for who she really was. He had watched her try to manipulate, pressure, and take advantage, and he had made sure she couldn't touch what he built. I sat there in silence, trying to absorb it all. I wanted to feel relief, maybe even triumph, but what I felt most was the weight of a secret. Linda had been walking around so sure of herself, so certain she would inherit everything. She had been talking about the house as if it already belonged to her, bragging about how she would carry on my father's legacy. And here I was, holding the truth that would shatter her world. The lawyer asked if I wanted him to contact her directly. I shook my head. "Not yet," I said quietly. I could see the surprise in his eyes, but he didn't press me. He simply nodded and slipped the papers back into the folder. I knew exactly why I wanted to wait. If I told her right away, she would cry, scream, maybe try to fight it in court. But if I kept it to myself, if I let her keep believing she had control, I would see who she really was when she thought she had the safety of wealth behind her. I wanted to watch her true colors come out, raw and unfiltered. Walking out of that office, the world looked different. The streets were the same, cars passing by, people rushing to work, but my life had shifted completely. I had more than I ever dreamed of, yet I couldn't celebrate. Not while Linda still strutted around, as if everything belonged to her. For now, the secret stayed with me. I tucked the will away like a weapon waiting for its time. Linda thought she was the one in power, but she had no idea. Every word she spoke, every plan she made, every demand she threw at me, it was all built on a lie she didn't even know existed. And I was going to let her believe it, at least for a while longer. Linda wasted no time stepping into the role she thought belonged to her. To anyone on the outside, she was the grieving widow. She wore black dresses every day, spoke softly with a broken tone, and pressed tissues to her eyes whenever neighbors came by. People brought casseroles, flowers, and sympathy cards, and she accepted all of it with a trembling hand and a nod that made her look fragile. She made sure every visitor left believing she was the woman my father had trusted with everything. But the moment the door closed and we were alone, her act dropped. There were no soft voices or tears then. She barked orders at me, told me to clean things, and reminded me that I was a guest in the house. She walked through the halls as if she owned them already, touching the furniture like it was a crown she had earned. Whenever I sat quietly in the living room, she'd glare at me and say, "Don't get too comfortable, Claire. This isn't your home anymore." She didn't just think it, she told people directly. At the grocery store, I overheard her telling a friend, "Charles left me well taken care of. The estate is mine to handle now." She said it with pride, her chin high, as though my father had personally crowned her queen of everything he worked for. People nodded, offering more sympathy, and she soaked it in like water. Back at home, she pushed harder. One night at dinner, she looked at me across the table and said, "You'll need to start looking for another place soon. This house is too big for both of us, and you don't belong here without your father." She said it so matter of fact, as if she were doing me a favor. She even added, "It's for your own good, Claire. You're young. You can make your own way. This life was never meant for you." I wanted to laugh at how confident she sounded, but I kept my face still. I knew the truth, and she didn't. So I nodded, pretending to understand, letting her think she was winning. The more she spoke, the more I saw the arrogance pour out of her. She bragged about how she would redecorate, how she might sell the house and move somewhere sunnier, how she would finally have the life she deserved. I listened carefully, saying little, storing every word in my mind. Her confidence only made her careless. She believed she had it all in her hands, and that belief made her crueler with each passing day. She pushed me further aside, dismissed me when people were around, and tightened her grip on the story she told the world. What she didn't realize was that every lie she told, every time she claimed something that wasn't hers, she was building the stage for her own downfall. I just had to stay quiet, let her play her part, and wait for the right moment to pull the curtain back. Linda's words grew sharper with every passing day. She no longer tried to hide her bitterness when it was just the two of us. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, she leaned forward and said, "You know, Claire, I did a lot for you after your father remarried me. I was the one who kept the house running. I was the one who made sure you had meals and clothes. Without me, you wouldn't have had half the comfort you grew up with. You owe me more than you realize." Her tone wasn't gentle. It was heavy, meant to make me feel guilty. She made it sound like my entire life had been carried on her shoulders, when in truth, she had always treated me like a shadow in the house. I nodded slowly, letting her believe her words were sinking in. She wasn't satisfied. "Your father would want you to do the right thing. If you ever see anything from him, money, property, whatever, you know it belongs with me. That's the only fair way. I gave up years of my life for this family, and you need to respect that." The way she said it made my chest tighten with anger, but I kept my face calm. I tilted my head as if I was thinking it over, even asking, "What do you mean by fair?" She smiled, mistaking my act for weakness. Within a week, she brought out papers she had drawn up. She slid them across the table, her fingers tapping the edge. "If you happen to inherit anything, all you need to do is sign this. It just makes things cleaner, easier. I'll handle the responsibilities, and you won't have to worry." I glanced down at the stack of papers, the legal language thick and confusing, but I didn't touch a pen. Instead, I asked questions, pretending I didn't quite understand, letting her explain more than she probably should. All the while, I had my phone nearby, recording everything she said. Her voice, her demands, her insistence that I transfer everything over. I captured it all quietly, without her ever noticing. As the days went by and I didn't sign, her patience ran out. She stopped inviting me to dinners with family friends, telling people I wasn't feeling well or that I was busy. I later learned she had been whispering that I was lazy, a leech, someone who only wanted to live off my father's success without lifting a finger. The lies spread quickly, and I could feel the shift in how some people looked at me. It hurt, but I didn't let it show. Every cruel word out of her mouth, every attempt to corner me, only made my resolve stronger. She thought she was backing me into a corner, but really, she was giving me more proof of the person she truly was. I played along, nodding when she scolded me, pretending to consider her demands, even letting her believe she was close to breaking me. All the while, I was storing her words like ammunition, waiting for the day I would need them. I found out about Linda's betrayal in the most unexpected way. One of the neighbors stopped me as I was walking back from the store. He gave me a strange look and said, "I heard Linda's putting the house on the market. That must be hard for you." His words froze me in place. I hadn't heard anything about a sale, and yet Linda was already acting like the house was hers to trade away. Later that evening, I checked online, and there it was, a quiet listing with photos of the house I had grown up in. The same rooms that still smelled faintly of my father's cologne. The description said it was being sold by the widow of Charles Reynolds. My jaw tightened as I stared at the screen. She hadn't even told me. She was just going to sell it out from under me, confident that no one would question her claim. It didn't stop there. Soon, I began to hear more whispers from neighbors. At the grocery store, in passing conversations, people repeated the things Linda was spreading. Claire's just greedy, she told them. She's only hanging around because she wants to get her hands on money that doesn't belong to her. Charles wanted me to have everything. She painted herself as the suffering widow and me as the spoiled stepdaughter, who couldn't stand on her own 2 feet. The worst part wasn't the lies, it was how easily people seemed to believe them. I saw the looks when I walked down the street, pity mixed with judgment, like I was the selfish one. Linda soaked it all up, standing taller, smiling more, acting as though the world already belonged to her. Then came the day that nearly pushed me over the edge. I came home to find a moving truck parked outside the gate. Men were carrying boxes into the house, their boots thumping against the hardwood floors. My bedroom door stood wide open, and inside, my belongings were being stacked into cartons. Books, clothes, even framed photos of my father and me were being wrapped up in paper as if they were just clutter to be cleared out. Linda stood in the hallway with her arms folded, directing the movers. "Box everything," she ordered. "We need this space cleared. She won't be staying much longer." Her voice was sharp, impatient, full of ownership she hadn't earned. For a moment, rage burned so hot in me I thought I would scream. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned against the doorway, watching quietly as my life was packed into boxes. Linda caught my eye and smirked, certain she had won. She thought she was pushing me out for good, stripping away whatever small claim I might believe I had. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't broken. I was calm, deliberate, patient. I let her dig deeper into her lies, let her treat me like a trespasser in my own home. Because the deeper she went, the harder she would fall when the truth finally came out. So I said nothing. I let the movers continue, let Linda gloat. Inside, I was steady. My time was coming, and when it did, she would never see it coming. The sound of boxes sliding across the floor pulled me from my thoughts. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw 2 movers carrying out my dresser, their boots heavy against the wood. My bedroom door was wide open, the walls bare where my father's photos had hung. My things were being carted away like trash. Linda stood there with her arms folded, chin lifted high, giving orders as though she were the queen of the house. "Take everything from the bedroom," she told the men. "She won't be needing it here anymore. Clear it all out." My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. I walked into the room and said firmly, "Stop. Put those down." The movers froze, glancing at each other, unsure of what to do. Linda spun toward me, her face red, her voice rising like a whip. "Don't you dare tell them what to do. This is my house, Claire. Mine. You don't make decisions here." Her voice carried through the halls, sharp enough to rattle the glass frames still hanging on the wall. The movers looked caught in the middle, their hands still gripping my furniture, but waiting for someone to settle the fight. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "You're not the owner. I am. And I'm telling you, stop moving my things." The men lowered the dresser carefully, their eyes flicking between us. For a moment, there was silence except for the sound of cardboard flaps rustling. Linda laughed suddenly, a harsh sound that echoed through the half-empty room. "You," she spat, shaking her head. "Don't make me laugh, Claire. Charles would never leave it all to you. You're just a spoiled child. Everything here is mine, and deep down, you know." Her laugh turned into a smirk, her eyes gleaming with arrogance. She thought she had me cornered, that her certainty was enough to make the world believe her. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout back. Instead, I looked at the movers, calm and direct. "You've heard me," I said. "I'm the legal owner. If you keep touching my things, you'll be working for the wrong person. Stop now." The men nodded hesitantly and stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. One of them muttered something about checking with the office before continuing. Linda's smirk faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered, waving her hand in the air. "Don't listen to her," she snapped at them. "She's confused. She doesn't understand how any of this works. She doesn't belong here. Just keep packing." But the movers stayed where they were, waiting. The confidence in Linda's voice was loud, but there was a crack in it now, small but telling. I stayed silent after that, my expression calm, letting her dig herself deeper. I could have pulled out the proof right then, shown her the papers and shut her down. But I didn't. Not yet. I wanted her to keep talking, to keep showing everyone just how greedy and cruel she really was. So I stood in the middle of the room, watching her unravel, letting her believe she still had control. Inside, I knew the tide had already turned. She just didn't know it yet. Linda's anger only grew after the movers stopped. She couldn't stand that I had told them to leave my things where they were. Instead of backing down, she became louder, more desperate. I started to notice her spending long hours in the study, rifling through drawers that used to belong to my father. One afternoon, I walked past the door and caught a glimpse of papers spread across the desk. Her head was bent close, pen scratching furiously. I didn't need to see the details to know what she was doing, trying to create her own version of the truth. That night, I heard her on the phone in the living room. Her voice carried down the hall, sharp and smug. She doesn't stand a chance, she told a friend. I'll bleed her dry in court if I have to. She'll regret ever thinking she could go against me. She laughed after she said it, a hard, ugly laugh that sent chills through me. I kept my phone tucked in my pocket, recording everything. Every word that left her mouth became proof of what she really was. I didn't interrupt, didn't storm into the room to argue. I let her keep talking, let her believe I was powerless while I quietly built my own shield. The next morning, she came after me directly. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when she marched in, her face set in stone. Enjoy this while it lasts, she said coldly. By the end of the month, you'll be on the streets. This house, this life, it's mine. You're just squatting here, and you'll be gone soon enough. I met her stare but didn't answer. My silence made her angrier. She slammed her hand on the counter, her voice rising. Don't think you can hide behind lawyers or pity. You're nothing without me, and you're about to learn it the hard way. I let her storm out, her heels echoing down the hall. My hands shook slightly around the mug, but not from fear. I knew what I had. The recordings, the memories of her threats, the lies she spilled so carelessly. Every cruel word was another piece of evidence, another nail in the case I was putting together. I spent evenings at my father's lawyer's office, quietly sliding my phone across the desk so he could listen. He shook his head as Linda's voice filled the room, full of arrogance and threats. Together, we began to stack everything neatly, building something she wouldn't be able to tear apart no matter how much she screamed or... While Linda strutted through the house, bragging about her victory and plotting her false future, I stayed patient. I didn't shout or fight back. I simply listened, recorded, and prepared. She thought she was tightening the noose around me, but in reality, she was wrapping it around her own neck. Each day that passed, she gave me more ammunition. And soon, she would find out that every word she had spoken in pride was the very thing that would destroy her. The day of the family meeting arrived, and I made sure everything was set. My father's relatives were invited, the lawyer was present, and the estate itself was the stage. I wanted witnesses. I wanted people to see the truth with their own eyes. When Linda arrived, she walked in as if she owned the place. Her heels clicked against the floor, her chin lifted, her smile wide. She clutched a folder under her arm, and I knew what was inside. Those fake papers she had been working on for weeks. She glanced at me like I was a child about to be scolded in front of the adults. The room filled with quiet chatter until she raised her hand and spoke. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with sorrow. "This hasn't been easy for me, but I know Charles would want us to handle this with grace. He trusted me to carry his legacy, and I intend to do just that." She opened her folder, sliding papers across the table for people to see. "These are the documents Charles wanted. His wishes were clear. Everything was meant to stay with me so I could protect what he built. I've already begun making plans to keep the estate in order." Her words were polished, her tone perfect, but I noticed the way her hands trembled ever so slightly as she pushed the papers forward. She was lying, and part of her knew the walls were closing in. I sat still, letting her go on. She painted herself as the grieving widow burdened with responsibility. She called me young and naive, someone who didn't understand what it took to manage such wealth. She spoke as though she was protecting me from myself, wrapping her greed in false kindness. Relatives nodded uncomfortably, unsure of what to believe. That was when the lawyer cleared his throat and leaned forward. His calm voice cut through Linda's performance. "That won't be necessary, Linda. I have the official will, signed and sealed by Charles Reynolds himself." The room went silent. The lawyer opened his briefcase and laid down the real documents, the ones with every proper mark and signature. His voice was steady as he read the lines. "The estate, the money, the business holding, all left to me. Not a single thing to Linda." I watched the color drain from her face. Her lips parted as though she wanted to protest, but no sound came out. The confidence she had carried into the room crumbled in seconds, leaving her pale and shaking. Gasps spread through the relatives as they leaned over the papers, eyes wide as the truth sank in. All her speeches, all her arrogance, all her lies collapsed under the weight of one document. I stayed quiet for a long moment, letting her sit in that silence, letting the sting of reality burn through her pride. The room was no longer hers to command. She had been exposed, but I wasn't finished with her yet. The room was already tense after the lawyer read the real will, but I knew the moment wasn't complete yet. Linda sat stiff in her chair, her fake papers clutched uselessly in her hand, her eyes darting around as if she might still find a way out. That was when I pulled my phone from my pocket and set it on the table. "I think everyone should hear this," I said calmly, pressing play. Linda's own voice filled the room, loud and clear. "She doesn't stand a chance. I'll bleed her dry in court. By the end of the month, she'll be on the streets." Murmurs spread through the room, relatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Linda's face turned pale. I let the recording continue. Her laughter followed, cold and smug, then her mocking words about my father. Charles was too blind to see anything. Everything should have been mine. A gasp went through the group. My aunt covered her mouth with her hand. My father's old business partner shook his head in disgust. The lies Linda had spun for weeks collapsed in seconds as her own voice betrayed her. Linda shot up from her chair, slamming her hand on the table. That's not real. She edited that. She's twisting everything I said. Her voice was high and frantic, nothing like the calm act she had tried to put on moments earlier. But nobody was convinced. People who had once nodded politely at her no longer met her eye. One of the movers who had been invited as a witness crossed his arms and said, I heard her say the house was hers. This doesn't surprise me at all. Linda's anger boiled over. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this to me. You think you've won, but you'll regret it. You'll regret everything. Her words cracked as she shouted, her voice breaking under the weight of her desperation. I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded to the lawyer beside me. He pulled a folded paper from his briefcase and slid it across the table toward her. Linda Reynolds, this is a formal eviction notice. You are no longer entitled to live on this property. You will have 30 days to leave. The room was silent except for the sound of Linda's breath, ragged and uneven. She stared at the paper as if it might catch fire in her hands. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The mask she had worn for so long was gone, and all that remained was a bitter, exposed woman with nowhere left to run. For the first time since my father's death, I felt the balance shift. The lies were finished, the threats stripped bare. Linda had no power left. Everything she thought she controlled had slipped through her fingers, and everyone in that room had seen it happen. Linda's fall didn't take long after that meeting. With the eviction notice in place, she had no choice but to pack her things. The movers who once boxed up my belongings were now carrying hers out of the house. I stood in the doorway as she tried to argue with them, but her words carried no weight anymore. She had lost every shred of authority. The lawyer made sure all the legal steps were airtight. She couldn't contest the will, couldn't drag me into endless court battles, couldn't twist my father's name to gain sympathy. Every door she might have used to crawl back into power was closed to her. I watched her stomp down the front steps with the last of her bags, her face twisted with anger and humiliation. For the first time, she looked small. News of what happened spread quickly. The same neighbors who once whispered her lies now shook their heads at the truth. People who had believed her stories avoided her on the street. Her mask of the devoted widow was gone, replaced by the reputation of a greedy manipulator who tried to cheat her own stepdaughter out of everything. She had chased respect, but all she had left was shame. Inside the house, the air felt lighter. Rooms that once echoed with her orders and accusations were quiet again. I walked through the halls, not as someone waiting to be pushed out, but as the rightful owner. I ended up in my father's study, the place where he spent so much of his time. The desk was still neat, his pen resting exactly where he had left it. I sat in his chair and looked around, not with tears or empty words, but with a steady calm. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about watching her crumble under the weight of her own greed, about knowing she could never again pretend to be someone she wasn't. She had taken joy in trying to control me, in spreading lies, in threatening me with nothing but her arrogance. Now she had none of it left. I leaned back, breathing in the quiet. The fight was over, and I hadn't needed to scream or stoop to her level. I had let her expose herself, step by step, until everyone saw who she truly was. That was the real revenge, not just winning the estate, but stripping away the mask she had hidden behind for so long. The house was mine. The truth was mine. And Linda? She had nothing.